First item is approval of the minutes for January 3rd, 2001. If all the board members has had a chance to review the minutes, are there any corrections or changes?
I move we adopt the minutes as written.
Been moved and seconded that the minutes be approved as written. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes have been approved. There are three items on the agenda tonight. The first item is 0012 VAR 10, Menards Design Standards Variance, Chapter 808, Table 6-11, lot on 17 acres, 4354 South Dreamin' Way, Perry Township, Section 19. Lot 9 of the Market Subdivision, Zone Light Industrial, LI and General Business GB. Staff, if I could have your report, please.
Staff has one recommended motion. That's to approve the design standards variance to Chapter 806, Table 6-1, based on the findings of fact and subject to the requirements of the County Highway and Drainage Engineers Report.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there someone here to represent the petitioner?
My name is Gary Clendenning, and I represent Menards. I really don't have a detailed presentation to make personally to you this evening. I really wanted to address you initially in that I understand at the last meeting there was discussion about some possible compromise from the plan that Menards had set forward. At that point in time, Menards hadn't anticipated that particular issue in that their conversations with previous staff and current staff, they kind of thought everything was really all right. So the people that had to make decisions as to possible adjustments or compromise were here. So this evening, we are prepared to once again address the reasons that we think the variance is appropriate and why we'd like to have it as it is presented. Tom O'Neill from Menards is here personally as well, and if there are specific ideas that you'd like to address to us or that you'd like us to consider, we kind of want to open the door to that conversation. So I guess with that, we would invite response from you. We do have Steve Smith and Tim Hansen here, as well as Tom O'Neill to address specific issues if that's required. We don't want to necessarily repeat ourselves from what's already been done last time. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Clinton. The last meeting, it was my understanding that Menards would be coming back to the board with either a different recommendation or standing on where they are. Is that correct?
They kind of wrestled with what the instructions were, I think, from the last time, and they chose to come back standing where they are because they still think that's appropriate. In terms of any kind of different recommendation, I suppose there are potential options between the 400 and some places, the 800 and some places. We really think the 400 is perfectly appropriate, and I can let Tom O'Neill address his experiences with all the other Menards and the discussions that were had with staff that led to that particular decision. In fact, you know, a year or so ago when they began the discussions with staff at that time was asking them to try to find some way to do even fewer spaces. So they thought that they were doing what was asked. I understand it didn't meet with quite the reception they were hoping when they came last time. So they didn't come up with a specific alternative proposal because, frankly, they weren't sure what might be attractive to anybody. And I think there was some discussion last time, according to Tim, that there was a suggestion, let's talk about it, and he felt like he wasn't in a position to have the authority to really talk about it last time, so we're here this time to make the presentation and or talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
My recollection of where we left last time was that I was feeling very deceived from the first presentation because no mention was made about the outlots, no mention was made about reducing the size of the lots. The conversation may have gone on with staff, but it certainly was not conveyed to me as a planning commissioner during the presentation. The idea of creating two small outlots that will generate two other businesses and extra traffic, quite frankly, had it been disclosed at the Planning Commission, my vote would have been different, and my vote was the deciding vote. Yeah, my concern at this stage is traffic, congestion, and the myth almost that somehow these two lots out there that are hanging out there are not going to be converted to blacktop.
Well,
And if I'm given those two choices, I'll have the one big lot.
Well, I understand, and that's one of the options. If we have to live with that, I think we're prepared to live with that, and we think that's a bad choice. In terms of deception, and again, and I think, as you know, I haven't been historically as involved as some of the other people that are here. So in terms of the background, as I understand it, the presentation, when they went to staff and said, what do? We talked through it. The plan, as you see it here in the request for variance, was thought to be perfectly appropriate. Tom O'Neill asks, how do I go about it? And they say, you kind of present the plat, come later to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the specifics on the parking. The lots are what the lots show on the plat. So there's not nobody's asking to re-subdivide, I don't think.
At this point.
Well,
What we were told last time, and what I think is the thorn of the issue, the very nexus of it, is that those outlots are intended to be spun off and new businesses and more traffic. Totally contrary to what was presented visually at the meeting.
well, as I recall, John, again, I may recall it wrong, in terms of what was presented at the meeting was Menards as a development, and no specifics as to what would happen to the other various lots thereafter. There was a subdivision of these lots. There was no specific presentation of what other development might come along
Gary,
down the road.
We were given a graphic of a huge parking area. Nothing was mentioned about outlots.
Well,
Nothing.
I think the graphic of the huge parking lot was a graphic that would show these 400 places. Now, and if that's wrong, I apologize, but I think that's what it was. Is that not what
Well, in order for us to grant a subdivision, they have to meet the requirements of our ordinance.
Well, sure.
Our ordinance says 808 parking lots, spaces.
What?
And so...
That's to get a building
through
permit for the site plan.
The Plan Commission. We assumed, when there was no discussion about we're going to go for a variance, that was never mentioned.
There was no intention to deceive, and I don't think there was any discussion about the variance, and it was my client's understanding there wasn't any need to discuss it at that time. It wasn't an intent to deceive at all, and I understand your reservations about that. That certainly wasn't the intention, and that's why they're back here tonight to talk about it. Was, again, Tim was here by himself last time because he didn't really think there was an issue. Hearing from you, obviously there was an issue, and that's why everybody's back to talk about it.
And last time we explained what our problems were, and I'd like to see somebody address those issues that were raised at the last meeting, Tim or somebody else.
Yeah, let me ask maybe Steve Smith initially to talk about the basis why he feels, again, that the plan as presented is the most appropriate and the most desirable, not just for Menards, but for the community. So let me kind of pass the baton to Steve, if I may. Thanks.
This is obviously the Menards plan that we've been working with for a long time. And Outlot 9 is where we envision the Menards being placed. Outlots 8, 10, and 11 possibly could be used for parking if necessary. Outlot 9 is here, Outlot 8, 10, and 11. Nearly all of that land on the west side of the road is zoned light industrial per the rezone back in '97. The land on the east side has always been represented and was zoned as business in 1997, and I think it was clear in the planning commission process that that was business. As a matter of fact, we talked at length about the tree buffer along 37, right through there, and its impact on the site, and we changed the site to accommodate that. But certainly outlots 1 through 7 are commercial outlots on the east side of the road. Again, on the west side of the road would be Menards on Lot 9 if the variance is granted, and then Lot 8, 10, and 11 would be other users if the variance isn't granted. Now, what would those users be? Well, they'd be light industrial users. As a matter of fact, this project will bring, obviously, the water to the site. It'll bring the sewer to the site. It'll bring the road to the site. So the site will be served with infrastructure, and the sites are zoned light industrial. That seemed to us to be a good thing. As a matter of fact, Monroe County has spent a lot of money to prepare light industrial sites in the last 5 years. Right now, development is ongoing in Northwest Business Park that was subsidized by the county through a TIF district to the tune of about $2 million to make utilities, sewer, water, road, available for light industrial. Monroe County also, with the city, subsidized the Bloomington Technology Park. The combined subsidy approached $1 million. I think it was $800,000, again, to make industrial land available. These lots, if the variance is granted, the lots that are going to be left available, again, are lot 8, 10, and 11. Again, light industrial zone lots. And I think certainly this is the plat that we've used all along, and I apologize for any confusion, but it really comes from the 1997 rezone. The variance probably wasn't discussed at the Plan Commission because it wasn't an issue. I can tell you, though, that the variance has been talked about with staff since January of last year when we began the process.
Number one, what happens at that pre-design conference is not binding on anybody.
Oh, I'm not saying it's binding.
No,
I didn't mean that at all.
But what I'm saying is, we should have been told that nothing in our report and nothing that Greg was told ever indicated that what we were doing at the Plan Commission was for only half the parking spaces that were required to do the subdivision.
Well,
So
yeah.
that we were blind when we approved that.
The site plan was not presented at the Plan Commission. No site plan was presented. Once we got our subdivision approval, then we were obliged to meet site planning regulations relative to the amount of building and the amount of parking. Now, our goal was obviously to be able to do that all on Lot 9, but that is dependent on this variance. And if we don't get this variance, then we'll use some or all of Lot 8, 10, maybe 11, depending on the layout, but we will use additional lots. So, I mean, the site plan has not yet been processed or approved by the planning staff, and it will be dependent on what you do tonight. The subdivision really didn't matter. The subdivision was flexible. I don't know if we even said how big a building and things like that at the subdivision process. It really wasn't an issue. The issue at the subdivision was creating the lots where the infrastructure would go, where the buffers would be, where the detention would be, which is another issue. This site's 46 acres, and of the 46 acres, 11 acres is lost to green space buffers, detention basins, and sinkholes. Another 4 acres is lost to right-of-way, 4+ acres. There's actually a net 30 acres that's actually being used on the site. So we already have a fair amount, as highlighted here, that's darkened in, a fair amount of land that actually isn't being used, that's remains green. No intent to deceive, though. I mean, absolutely. I mean,
Okay, but we assume when we get a subdivision that it meets all the requirements of the subdivision ordinance.
and it did.
No, because there's not room there for 808 parking spaces, plus staying away from the sinkhole, plus your loading and unloading.
If the variance, again, if the variance isn't granted, we just need to use another lot for additional parking. Again, it's adjoining, we own it,
Okay.
I mean, Brown and Menards are in contract on the whole parcel, so Menards can use as much of the land as they need. I mean, they could have, in the process, decided they wanted a smaller store than they've got, and they still could decide that. Or they could decide they wanted a bigger store. Those are site plan issues and weren't subdivision issues. In the subdivision, we wanted to get lots that would be flexible enough to provide what we thought we were going to do. And again, if the parking variance weren't granted, we'd simply keep more of the land for ourselves, keep another lot or two for ourselves to get that additional parking. But again, if we thought, or I think if the staff thought that it was an issue, I mean, it could have been mentioned by anybody. at that hearing. Again, certainly it's been a matter of discussion for a long time. We plotted out the course of action to get from, concept to construction for the project, and this was one of those steps.
My recollection is at the Planning Commission meeting that the discussion was of rerouting the road. The reason for rerouting the road was to get all of the parking on one side of the road, so people wouldn't have to go back and forth across there. The question was put to me, rhetorically I suspect, well, John, you wouldn't want people crossing the road, would you? Doesn't it make more sense for us to be able to get all of our parking over on the other side? At no time did anybody say, and oh, by the way, the parking on the other side is just going to be 400 and something. It wasn't done.
I agree. And again, the parking on this, for this building and any other building, the prime customer parking will be in front of the building, which is where it is on Lowe's. It's where it is on everything that's like this. You put the parking in front of the building. And it is true, if we wouldn't move the road over, then the parking in front of the building would have been across the road, or it would have been around at the ends of the building. So the road was reconfigured to fit the site. And if, again, we don't get the variance, we'll put parking at the ends of the site.
So be it.
But again, what it means is we brought sewer, water, road, probably $1 million of infrastructure to the site, and we've got light industrial lots that will go basically unused because of that.
You mean it's going to take all of Lot 8, all of Lot 10, and all of Lot 11?
No, I don't know
to
that.
add the additional?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it will take some or much of those lots, yes. Those lots, well, particularly 10 and 11 aren't very big. So it will take much of that land, and I haven't done a layout to know.
So even at this stage, we still don't have layouts to see what the monstrosity is going to look like.
No. Again, we will, if the variance is not granted, then we'll submit a site plan for approval that meets the parking code, though I think we feel, and the staff recommended the variance because that's more parking than the site needs. And that usually is the test, is what is the appropriate amount of parking for a site. And I think the board asked that we leave the land green, but again, we're bringing infrastructure to it. It's a zone site, and we already have 11 acres out of 46 green on the site already. But again, we're here to listen. Obviously, Tom wasn't here last month, didn't anticipate the discussion, so he's here to listen to you and respond to you.
I'll repeat then what I said before. We assumed when, or at least I assumed when I got my BZA petition, that this lot was big enough for 808 spaces. The one that we got. Because the first one we got was not correct. It was not what came to the Plan Commission. Apparently you had not provided the up-to-date thing for the Plan Commission. So when I got this, I think this will do 808 sites. And so we're asking questions to find out where the land that isn't going to be used as a parking lot is, and we find out it's not in this
Right.
lot.
Yeah, and I apologize for any confusion, but hopefully it's very clear now exactly what's going on. Certainly, we didn't intend to cause confusion. We intended to show the site plan that would result if the variance were granted. That's the reason we're here, is to ask for variance, and this would show what would happen if the variance were granted. It doesn't show what would happen if the variance wasn't granted. Quite honestly, we thought the variance would be granted relatively quickly, simply because it was parking that was not necessary.
And
So we didn't show that, and again, I acknowledge that I can't go back and change that, but I think I think all those issues are on the table now.
now, personally, I have no objection to less blacktop, but I want you to keep that land in that lot and make it green. Then if all of a sudden everybody decides that what's at Menards is what we want for Christmas and 2,000 of us all go at once, then there's a spot.
Yeah, I think Tom O'Neill is here to talk if you want about, their history with parking requirements. And of course, we have our own history here. I think Lowe's, I don't know what the ratio is, but I'm sure it's not the same ratio that the county's requirement is. I mean, what's happening, these large stores weren't anticipated when the parking ratio was set, and the ratio just doesn't hold when you get that large a store. It's good probably when you have a small, traditional 10, 20, 30,000 square foot store, but when you get 160,000 square feet, that ratio just doesn't work anymore. And it's true every place. And Menards certainly has a lot of experience. They're building 400 car lots for this size of store in a lot of locations and with success, as are the other retailers. It's not just Menards. I think the literature shows that kind of parking isn't necessary.
Well, my observation is that planning is a combination of objective criteria and subjective criteria, kind of all thrown together. If we allow Menards to come back in and set up their own subjective criteria that refutes our objective criteria based on what they think their objective criteria is, and nothing follows along for the benefit and convenience of the community, which is what the standard is for the subjective part of it, seems to me that we have totally thrown everything out the window. And every petitioner that comes in front of us can say, I know far better than the Planning Commission what my parking needs are. Therefore, your chart ought not apply to us.
I think there are many situations where the ordinance is in fact out of date, and I think in this situation, your staff probably agrees with us that the ordinance is out of date. I think when we come and ask for a variance like this, we have to have a good basis for the variance. Again, the tendency 10 years ago was to always build enough parking and maybe build too much parking. The tendency the last few years is to build no more parking than necessary. And that really was the nature of the discussion when we came in with Leo a year ago was, well, okay, boy, let's not put any more spaces out there than we need. As a matter of fact, we just took a petition to the City Board of Zoning Appeals a couple of months ago and asked for a variance, and they actually asked us to have less spaces and committed us to a maximum number of spaces instead of a minimum number. It's kind of ironic, but in fact, the codes don't always apply, and it's important to apply the best information available. And again, we're not asking for something that the staff doesn't totally agree with. The number of spaces just isn't appropriate for this application. And if it was, I mean, we wouldn't have an argument, we wouldn't be here. I mean, we want enough space. We want our customers to be able to park there. That's very important. By the same token, we don't need a sea of parking that's not going to be used.
But do you see that we think all of this is going to be impervious surface, except for the areas around the sinkhole?
I think what would happen now, yeah, lots 8, 10, and 11 would become light industrial.
Yeah.
Yes, out of the 46-acre site, again, to which approximately $1 million has been spent on sewer, water, and roads to make the site available. Yeah, we need light industrial sites in this county. We are subsidizing light industrial sites in this county. Here's someone that's going to put them on the market, and we're saying we don't want to do it because it's going to be paved. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense.
We're saying we don't want to do it because what the initial presentation was so totally misleading that we're feeling very betrayed.
Well, I can't take that back, but we're here tonight. We're all here tonight to try to clarify that. Certainly it wasn't intentional.
And I haven't heard any response from any representative of Menard so far. I hope that's going to change as to how the plans are to keep the rest of that across the road in green space permanently.
To do what?
To keep the stuff now that where you're shrinking the lot to make sure that it is permanently greened.
Now, all of this is committed.
Talking about to the left of the road as we're viewing the diagram.
These are the lots over here. All of this is green. All the shaded areas are green. But yeah, these would be light industrial zone lots if you approve variance. If not, I suppose they would be parking lot. Not very good parking lot, not a necessary parking lot, it would be a parking lot.
This is what got me so confused. not being on the other planning commission and getting hit bold-faced with it last time, I was very confused about it because I thought it was one big lot and we were just reducing the size of the parking, the rest of it would be left green space.
Yeah,
I
too
really
often,
did, Steve.
these petitions
It
go
was
too
misled to
long.
me.
Yeah, these
Pretty
petitions go too
strongly
long.
misled to me.
Yeah, and the whole thing came in, and you were presented with a short staff report, and, I don't know, just a few minutes of discussion, and we, and to a certain lesser extent, the staff, has been working with this for a year, and I suppose sometimes we don't say enough and explain enough. But certainly, we're here tonight to be sure that, our proposal is clear, and certainly we didn't intend to deceive in any way. If anything, we probably underestimated the issue simply because we've assumed for a year that, you didn't need that parking, and the county's position would be don't put any parking in you don't need, so it shouldn't be an issue. Again, because of the changing attitude, I think, every place about not paving any more than you have to pave.
And it's not for me, it is not the smaller amount of parking. It is that land that would have been saved from being paved over is just going to go somewhere else and be paved over by someone else. And if part of that could be turned into green space,
That's really where the questions, future topics have to be addressed.
And we're here listening to that. Now, I hope we're getting now to where I think we need
We
to
said
be.
it now, we said it last time,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing anything that's saying, we can accommodate that. And to me, that does not meet, the failure to accommodate does not meet the custom and convenience of the community standard.
So some or all of the space that would have been parking, you'd prefer to leave in green as opposed to have it as an industrial site, is what?
right, because that's what we thought we were getting. See, nobody told us that everything that we were seeing only showed what happened with the variance after it had been passed. So we assumed that then there is empty space.
Oh, gosh.
And there,
Yeah.
you see.
No, I mean, a fortune is being spent opening this site up for development. I mean, there's a lot of green space on the site, but just to leave the land after it's developed as open space, I mean, there's areas of open space in our community, there's areas for development, and once you bring sewer and water, I mean, we're looking at the Economic Development Corp. and the county commissioners are looking for industrial development sites, and again, subsidizing those sites, and here we have them. I mean, if we're going to have green space, this may not be the space for green space. It's zoned industrial on one side, it's zoned business on the other side. This might be the place to put some industry in addition to what's already going in there, and the green space maybe should be, I mean, we've already got 11 acres of green space, but if there's green space, maybe it should be someplace else that doesn't have sewer and water and road all in place,
And 2 sinkholes.
which are part of the green space,
Yeah.
which are part of the green, in accordance with the CARS regulation, not only sinkhole, but the buffer area. So we're not close to the sinkholes.
Again, quite frankly, part of the consideration that I heard at the Planning Commission meeting was that this was just going to be one business. We were all very worried about traffic. I was making the decision at the Planning Commission level on the basis of one business being there, Menards, and the traffic it would generate. Now we're talking about probably 3 businesses, perhaps more. It's a totally different picture than was presented.
Oh, I think we've always had these lots, these commercial lots have always been there, John.
But there was
They've always
never
been there.
any discussion that anything but a Menards was going into that area.
Well, that's-
Otherwise, I truly would have voted against this.
That's the only thing that is on the table, Menards is buying it, but, I mean, these are commercially zoned lots, and really what, pays the freight to bring all that infrastructure out here. I mean, I don't know how anybody at the Planning Commission could have got the idea that they were going to just stay green. I mean, I've not processed a subdivision yet where we had lots on the subdivision where we didn't then develop the lots. I mean, that's what we do. And I can't, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, that certainly wasn't presented that way, or it wasn't conveyed that way. I can't say that it wasn't misunderstood, but it's certainly, we didn't present it in any way that it was going to just all remain green.
The Menard lot is how many, is it this, what you got drawn there now, is that 17 acres?
Lot 9 is, it's pretty close to 17.
Okay.
It's
That-
17 acres.
It is
It's
the
17.
17, okay.
And the whole site's 46,
I understand that.
and we have 30
I got a little confused there.
buildable, of which 17 is Menards. Those are all.
So this one is up here.
Again, this is Tom O'Neill with Menards, and obviously here listening to all the conversation.
Good evening. I'm Tom O'Neill with Menard Incorporated for 777 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Mr. O'Neill, we need to swear you in before we go, if you would. You
Certainly.
swear affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief.
Absolutely, yes.
Please continue.
If I may speak on the merits of what we're, I guess it's first, it may be better to backtrack a little bit. When we've been coming to Monroe County, to Bloomington the last year, looking for a site to potentially build upon, in meeting with staff at the county level, we met with staff at the city level looking for alternative sites there. We've tried to be nothing but open and honest, and I hope if there's any misunderstanding that it doesn't reflect poorly on myself. I truly do want to be open and honest about what we're trying to present to you folks and to the county. When we went to the Plan Commission meeting, I think Steve would concur with me, that was for the subdivision of the property, and the subdivision of the property was anticipating a variance, because that was, what we were, in our discussions with the county months and months and months previously, asked to do, to keep down the amount of parking spaces directly in front of our store to a bare minimum. It was also in line with what we prototypically park, and we took the procedure that we were advised to take: platting, BZA, and then come back through for site plan review and approval. So those are the reasons why we went in that order, and it was not with an intent to deceive anybody as to what we were proposing. On the merits of the proposal, the ordinance as drafted requires over 800 parking spaces, which is twice as much that we prototypically put in front of or need in one of our stores. One of our best stores is in our home city of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, on the west side of Eau Claire. It's in the top 10% of our stores as far as performance, and it has 408 stores. I can give you a list of stores which are similarly sized, which have a similar amount of parking spaces attributable to them. We find that ordinances such as Monroe County's, which has a parking figure of essentially 5 spaces per 1,000, doesn't really apply to a user like Menard Inc. because of several reasons. The large size of our store. When you get to a store of 160,000, the number which is applicable to a 5 or 10,000 square foot box is not the same which is applicable to a 160,000 square foot user. Plus, we also find that we're a lot different than other users like a Meijer, like a Walmart, that have really intensely packed shelves. We have a hint of warehouse about us. We have large, bulky items such as whirlpools and treated lumber, which take up a lot of space. We have display areas for kitchens and cabinetry, which take up a lot of space, and therefore, even though those square feet are counted for parking space, it's not with really intensive retail compared to a lot of the other users to which those parking numbers in the ordinance are directed. Another reason is the fact that unlike a lot of the users who construct their parking fields for their busiest time of the year, a Meijer or Walmart will construct their lot in accordance with the Christmas time. Well, we don't really have a Christmas rush, a December rush like that. We have spring and summer, in which the customers that come to our store, it's our busiest time, it's spread out over a multi-month period instead of one intensive 3 or 4 week period. For those reasons, that is why we come up with the number we do as far as parking spaces. And that's why it's not really in tune with what most parking ordinances require. Coming to a Board of Zoning Appeals or Board of Zoning Adjustment for a parking variance is not unusual for us. It's almost invariable in our approval process in any municipality that we go to. And most places, to be perfectly honest, like the fact that we're accommodating our use based on our historical knowledge as to what we need, and they don't want the unused bituminous in front of the store. I guess the argument has been made that regardless of whether it's parking or another user in all these subdivided lots, what's the difference? It's still impervious surface area. Well, I think the argument against that is the fact that if, as Steve indicated, if you're going to have a commercial center, if you're going to have a business area, then it should be with the intent that everybody thrive and survive for the benefit of all. And when we go in there and when other users come in next to us, the cross-shopping which is generated is beneficial to all and increases revenues and results in a better tax base to the community in which we're going in as well, as opposed to us being out there all by our lonesome. For those reasons, we would respectfully request that the variance be granted as is. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. O'Neill? Maybe later?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of the petition or make comments on the petition? Yes.
Since it appears that there's no public comment, are there any questions for staff that we could answer to perhaps clarify this issue?
Okay.
Do you want a summary from staff the way it was presented to us, or any clarification on this to aid you in your decision?
It might help.
Okay. Greg can interject since this is his case if I'm saying anything strong, but this is my understanding of this whole situation. Mr. O'Neill came and met with Leo and myself probably like a year and a half ago, and we talked about them potentially coming out to this area. Usually when we do a pre-design conference of that nature for a large use, we go through the zoning ordinance and generally look and see if they'll need any variances for anything, or if they'll generally meet the design standards, if they're permitted use in that zone and so forth. We had noticed that they would need roughly about 800 parking spaces, and Mr. Sims at the time said that seems like an awful lot, which it does. I would have to agree with him. And then Mr. O'Neill stated, as he just testified, that typically they ask for a variance to try to reduce it because they never realistically use that many parking spaces. And Mr. Sims and I were aware that there were sinkholes out in that area. And so, as you know, parking lots create impervious surface and increase runoff, and they would go into those sinkholes. So we recommended that they request a variance. A year later, which was about 3 months ago, Smith Newbecker, representing Bill Brown, brought out this subdivision for the markets, which has 10 or 11 lots. Through staff's analysis, and I know the Drainage Board and the Highway Department's analysis, it was all of our assumption that each of the 11 lots were to be developed independently, meaning we all assumed that there'd be potentially 11 separate uses out here, one in each lot, and that perhaps, Mr. Irvine, the misunderstanding is because there was a lot of focus at the Planning Commission on Menard specifically, because we knew that use was going to come out here. But as far as the technical analysis that was done. We all did the analysis as far as traffic and drainage on potentially 11 uses coming out here. It was also our understanding, or I guess our assumption, that Lot 9 would be able to hold this site plan overlaid on it with all 800 spaces, and that if they were going to request a variance, that there would be leftover area.
Okay.
I think that pretty much summarizes it. Just so you're understanding that at the Planning Commission and the subdivision stage, as far as the technical review, perhaps the Planning Commission wasn't clear on it, but as far as the technical review, we had the understanding that each lot would be developed independently. We weren't aware that the petitioner was planning on using, that their site plan would include more than one lot.
Thank you, Mary. Is there any further questions from the board to the staff or to the representatives of McNard?
I just have one question for staff. Usually when there's going to be a variance and something to Plan Commission, in both the variance it says and in the Plan Commission materials we get, it states that this is going to the other board. We didn't get any of that. Is there a reason?
Correct me if I'm wrong, we had discussed it with Mr. Neal like over a year ago about them potentially wanting a variance, and then we hadn't heard anything to that effect since, and they hadn't filed for the variance at the same time they did the subdivision, so we weren't sure whether they were going to file for the variance or not.
And you thought that Lot 9 would accommodate the 808? I mean, that was your assumption?
Right.
Okay.
Because theoretically, they could have this happens sometimes, they get the subdivision approved, and then a year later, they start selling or leasing the individual lots, and then when they're drawing up the site plan, they realize they need a variance for one design standard or another, and then they get the variance at that time. Typically, someone doesn't get a variance at the subdivision stage. It's unlikely.
But usually, if you
But
know
if we
there's gonna be a variance,
we
you
cross-reference
tell
the
us.
cases, so we didn't
I
know.
don't ever remember that not happening, and that's why I think it caught us totally by, caught me at least. I
Right.
can't say
They hadn't
us.
filed for the variance at the time. We do, we have meetings, pre-design conferences, 5, 10 a day. We're never sure if the person's going to come in a month from now and actually file. Some people we'll never see again, so when this subdivision was approved before Planning Commission, they hadn't filed for the variance. So we weren't aware that they even still intended to. That's why it wasn't cross-referenced or mentioned in the staff report.
Steve, you want to speak further on this?
Yes. One of the reasons, of course, or the reason, I suppose, that Tom is here is to hear all of this discussion, because what we got after the hearing last time was somewhat confusing also. So we were also confused. And we have obviously ideas and have talked about what we thought would happen this evening and what we thought that you wanted. And what we thought you wanted was green space in lieu of the parking. And certainly, we always envisioned that space that was gained would be usable space for light industrial on these other lots. We recognize that the parking variance would be of value to us, and it would probably be a win-win situation if we compromise in some way such that the variance is granted and the extra 400 parking spaces aren't built. Yet, the lots that we have are, in fact, industrial sites. They have sewer and water and road, and those sites are at a premium in Monroe County for many reasons, karst being one of them. There's a lot of reasons why these sites are at a premium and why even our own government is subsidizing their creation. We would be willing to, we're looking for compromise, we would be willing to look for a format to possibly dedicate the same amount of green space, what it would be 3 or 4 acres, whatever that acreage would be, dedicate that amount of green space in some other location that didn't have sewer and water and road and all the infrastructure necessary to, in fact, make it light industrial land as a compromise, and again, in hopes that we end up with a win-win situation, that we have the industrial land and yet the county gets something in return for granting the variance. That dedication could be to the Sycamore Land Trust, and in fact, then we would know that it would be held in green, and we could make that kind of commitment tonight, that we would work with Sycamore Land Trust and your staff to to set aside an equivalent amount of green space, where again, all the infrastructure isn't put in place. Because, again, we work so hard in this community to make these lots available. This has the green space it needs to buffer the adjoiners and to buffer the highway. To then not use the industrial space that we've got seems like such a waste. So that's, again, we're trying to put something on the table here that might have us giving something back for the variance that we're asking for you.
So you're saying you'd give one of the commercial lots?
No, someplace else. A site,
Different location.
somewhere else. Again, a site someplace that doesn't have sewer, water, and road, and possibly work with Sycamore Land Trust to go find a site. Maybe it's adjacent to some land they already have. A wooded site, a farm site. Again, this idea of Sycamore Land Trust has been used in other development petitions as somewhat of a resource or a way to work out some problems. So we're willing to work with you, I guess what I'm saying. I think we agree it's better for us not to build all those parking places, but we also agree that it seems like a waste of serviced land to leave all that land green.
Can we ask David if that is a possible solution?
If you want to think about that, it'd probably be good to continue this and we'd look into see if we could accomplish that in some way.
If we disapprove the petition, does that preclude them coming back with the proposal that's just been made on the table?
I guess I would kind of feel that it would, because if they came back even with an added dedication, it would be off-site, and so this site wouldn't change at all.
That's my trouble with it right now.
Jen, if I may, I think if there's room...
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you please come up to the mic? Just for minutes.
If there's room for further discussion, I think procedurally we would prefer a continuance rather than a denial and start over. And if I may, just while I'm here, and I need to make a personal remark. I made the comment, John, that you referred to about moving the road in and parking across there. I thought that was accurate at the time, and I still think it's an accurate argument. I didn't know this was an issue at all, and I still think if the road was really down here, whether we're talking 400 places or 800 places, one of the options is to park across the street. I did not know there was any issue at all about how much parking. So if that had the impact of misleading you, I personally apologize, because there was no intention, and there's certainly nobody on my client asked us to try to mislead you. I don't think they intended to. And it's clearly my impression that they all thought they were doing the right thing. In hearing the discussion tonight, Mary and Greg thought there wasn't any need to bring it to you. We thought, and my clients thought, well, it's not an issue, and we're talking about it later, so they didn't address it. There was no intention whatsoever to keep that issue from you. So to the extent that it seemed to have that impact, I personally apologize.
Thank you, Gary.
Well, I move, in light of that, you saved the day just then, Gary, from my perspective at least. I move we continue it to allow further discussion.
Is there a second on that?
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Go ahead, Steve.
Just a question. Since we can't talk to the board outside of the hearing, any comments you had on my proposal, or any feedback you have for us to work on for next hearing, because it's really not appropriate for us to talk to you outside of this forum.
Well, I really think we need to talk to staff and to David, because, you see, they thought that there were the 800 spaces there too. And I don't think we can go back and undo what the Plan Commission did just because we all misunderstood. And so I'm sort of in limbo. I just really don't know.
very elementary question, Steve, but I've got to ask you. How many more parking places, if you had to put them on the present site that we're looking at, could you put on there?
On Lot 9,
On Lot 9.
On Lot 9, with the plan? None?
few if any.
Few, if any, okay.
Yeah. The Lot 9 was designed for the 400.
The lot
Plus or minus.
was designed for the 400.
Yeah, we
See,
we
that-
assumed that there would be a
That may
variance.
have been,
Yeah.
right there may have been the misleading thing that's got this all in trouble. I'm
We
not
assumed
sure.
that.
That's exactly.
I think that is it, because I personally had never seen, and it may be my fault, and I'll take all the blame for it, the drawing that you have up there till right now.
That's two of those.
See, we had never seen that, Steve.
Oh,
Lynn and
I see.
because
Last month, the presentation was just the site plan.
we did never see what you got up tonight. See, that has really helped me.
And
To
if we
understand.
saw that at the planning commission, it was certainly never clear to me that, when I had the conversation with Gary, and I accept that there was no intent to mislead Gary. I mean, and I've known you for years, and I take that. But when we had that conversation, my assumption was that we were talking about 800 spots, up to the right-hand corner of that thing. And I think that was a wild assumption on my part, because no mention was made about smaller parking lots, or at least fewer number of spaces.
And then when I see it the first time at this meeting a month ago, I presumed that you had a lot drawn here big enough for the 800, and you wanted to go with the variance, and maybe there would be green space or something on that rest of that lot, not 3 other lots. And this answered a lot of questions to me, this one drawing here. At least we know what we're talking about now.
Yeah, we really presumed from the start that the parking variance would be granted simply because we felt the attitude in the public was don't build any more parking than you have to. Like I said, we've been limited in the amount of spaces we can build in some situations as opposed to the other way around, because the thinking is changing to not build any more than necessary.
I have moved that we continue it.
We have a motion that has been moved and seconded that the petition be continued until next month. If that's agreeable with the board members, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign.
Mr. Dillon, I need
Yes.
to do a voice call.
Okay.
John Irvine,
I vote in favor of the continuance.
Dale Connard,
I'd vote in favor.
Lynn Dillon,
In favor of the continuance?
Carol Weiss.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, are you clear as to the assignment for next month?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve and Gary. Okay. For the people in the back that need a place to sit down, come on up and
I think they just want to know.
Don't you think that helped us?
oh yeah, definitely. Yep, I agree. What a mess. If we'd have seen that first time.
That doesn't even tell us really.
No.
If you think about it, they come in there and they say, this is our plan, you're gonna assume that, when they've got it marked off there, that that's gonna be the 800 or something.
That's what I assumed, you may got wrong.
I'm still furious.
Was I clear?
And I'm not at all sure that it's appropriate, because I'm concerned about traffic, That is a major.
Traffic will be a major. Let's continue on with item 2 on today's business. 0101, variance 01 at 1001 Properties, Inc. Spectre Site Design Standard varies to Chapter 834, Table 34-1, front and rear yard setback for WCF. A portion of 1 acre parcel on a portion of 1 parcel on .13 acre, 4895 South State Road 446, Salt Creek Township, Section 33, a part of 60, zone pre-existing business and environmental constraints overlay. Staff, if I could have your report, please.
Thank you. Staff's recommended motion is to disapprove this petition based on the findings. If I could interject one note for this petition. This board has had a couple, I think one setback variance for WCF towers in the past, as well as other variance proposals for WCF towers. And I just would like to keep you in mind that the purpose of this meeting, and you're directed to just review and either approve or deny variance for this tower. You're not approving or denying the placement of the tower as a whole. That's going to go to the Planning Commission on the 20th.
Okay. Just as a point for the audience here, we'll ask for people to speak in favor of the petition, and then we'll ask for people to speak against the petition. Obviously, it looks like we have a full house tonight, and we appreciate that. The only thing we would ask is try to be brief and try not to repeat all of the items on the agenda. And with that, why, we will call for the representative of the petitioner.
Good evening. I'm R.D. Jones, local attorney, and I represent the petitioners in this matter. The petitioners are 3 in total: Ubiquitel, SpectraSite, and 101 Properties, Inc. SpectraSite would be the owner of this cell tower. Ubiquitel would be the service provider, and 101 Properties is the landowner. I will speak briefly about this proposal for the variances, and I have 4 individuals here who are project managers, acquisition managers, RF engineer, radio frequency engineer, and site engineer to answer any technical questions that you may have. As indicated, what the ultimate purpose is for my clients to locate a cell tower on 446, approximately 1 mile from Lake Monroe on 446. The site is located at 4895 State Road 446. In what all of you, I'm sure, are aware, at that site is boat storage businesses. I think a gas station in one of them, not on this property, but just north of this property. Boat maintenance and storage facilities, basically. And they have been there for many years. The property there is zoned business. It's grandfathered business. When zoning was changed in that area, these businesses had to be grandfathered, which happened several years ago. The variance that is needed is a variance from the front setback of 200 feet. The ordinance states that there shall be a setback of 200 feet and 500 feet from side and rear setbacks to other property owners, that is. This location, if this cell tower is placed at this location, it would be, the tower would be approximately 35 feet from the road right-of-way, and from the actual road, it would be between 90 and 100 feet to the edge of the road. So it would be within the 200 feet of the roadway, certainly. We are asking for the variance that would permit this site to be used, and that variance would require you to simply or to only change the setback from right-of-way to 35 feet and about 260 feet on the rear setback. The reasons we're asking for this this variance is because this site is the only site that my clients could locate in the area, in the corridor, along 446, which, and when I say corridor, I mean the area in which a tower needs to be located so cellular use can be in that area, on Lake Monroe in that area, in Paintown, and in the surrounding area. The closest tower to this area is one located in Smithville, which is on Fairfax Road. That's approximately 1 mile from the edge of the lake, and about 3 to 3.5 miles north of this site, where there is a tower currently existing and in use. My clients are co-users on both of those towers, as are several other companies. And by the way, on this tower, it would be permitted co-user, obviously, also. Other companies have already contacted Ubiquitel inquiring about that. And I believe there can be up to 5 or 6 companies on this one tower. If a tower is not located here, then there will be an area, continue to exist as it does now, where cell phones will not be effective in that area, in most of that area, and on Lake Monroe. If a tower is placed at this site, or very near this site, then it will permit total usage, total function throughout the lake area, throughout Paintown, the state park down there, etc., between this tower and the one on Fairfax. A few days ago, last week, I was provided with a copy of the planning director's comments concerning our petition. And since that time, I have obtained from various sources letters which address the concerns that the planning department had concerning this request. And I have filed those letters with Mary, and I have copies here of all of those to provide to you. First of all, the planning department has brought up the question of safety and has pointed out that this tower, it's going to be 199 feet tall. It's actually 190 feet tall, and there will be an 8-foot antenna on top of it. So it is under 200 feet tall. It was pointed out that it was believed that this might be a safety hazard because if the tower toppled over toward the road, it would land on the road and thereby not be a very good thing. I have submitted today a letter to the planning department from the project engineer, and that letter sets forth in great detail the construction of this tower, what it will withstand, etc. And it points out that this tower exceeds all federal requirements. It will withstand wind up to 85 miles per hour, plus 1 inch of ice in combination with that wind. I also have here with me tonight to answer any questions concerning that, and that individual will tell you that this tower, as all of these monopole towers are made, it is made so that if it commences to topple, it will not simply topple over as something very rigid. Instead, it will collapse on itself because it has design features in it that will cause it to do that. My client owns several thousand of these towers in this country, and based upon their experience These things are totally safe. They cause absolutely no harm to the health and safety of the residents in the surrounding area or those using roadways. With regard to adjoining property, it was stated in the planning director's comments that if this tower is constructed here, that it could or might adversely affect adjoining properties. In that, she's pointed out that to the rear, there's an 18-acre tract, which I believe is zoned forest reserve, or at least part of it is, and that it could be a residential area, and maybe to the south side of this tract. I've been down there twice and inspected this area. It is impossible for me to see how any, well, the planning director pointed out that it might be developed as residential. I don't see how any of that property could be developed as residential within 500 feet of this property, because it's a ravine that goes almost straight down. I suppose one could argue that it remotely could be, but as a practical matter, I don't see how. And I am unaware of any empirical research or studies that have been conducted that show that these towers, in fact, do decrease property values. These towers are being located in close proximity to each other throughout this country, as is necessary to permit a continuous flow of cell phone usage. And if these things were creating significant detrimental value of adjoining property, I think that we would be hearing about that and reading a lot about it. It was also pointed out by the planning department that the existing owner of this property, 101 Properties, Inc., is able to have a reasonable use of that property for boat storage and maintenance. I have submitted today a letter from the owner of that property indicating factually what the situation is, and that is that he has owned it for 10 years, and over that period of time, he has from time to time rented it out to tenants for boat storage and maintenance. The existing tenant in there defaulted last fall, went bankruptcy, and since that time there has been no tenant. There are several boats and items of boats located on this property because the owners have not picked them up, and it has required my client to hire a full-time caretaker to protect those until this spring when people pick up their boats, etc. This property is approximately 5 acres. On the south side of it, there's a huge hill that is approximately 30 to 40 feet higher than the road level. And that area up on top of that hill is totally unusable for anything. My client has, over the years, thought of ideas to utilize this property, but all of those have been stifled by the fact that the land is not perk, and my client cannot get any further sewage lines to that property or any kind of situation that would permit more bathrooms, etc. This site is only 75 feet by 75 feet. An easement would be granted to go up the side of the hill to the site. The site basically cannot be viewed from people coming from the lake unless in the winter time and they're back far enough from it, they might be able to see the very tip top of it. The entire tower would be in view coming from Bloomington out to the lake. But as I said, it is not in direct eyesight. It would be up on this hill. The Planning Department's comments also included the statement that there were other sites available in this area. I have submitted a letter to the Planning Department today by the land acquisition individual who personally checked this out, and he is here tonight to testify and answer any questions also. He was not able to locate any property within the permitted corridor that the landowners would lease to him. Basically, when you drive down 446 from the lake for about 3 or 4 miles back toward Bloomington until you get to the next tower, the relay tower, which is on old 446, you see that where the land does not go straight down almost, steep ravines on each side, where there is some land along the road, there's a residence there. And that is without exception. There is one area that could have been used. The people have it for sale and would not permit the tower there because they want to sell the property. And they did not want a tower on it. There are other business locations along the road that a tower could be located, no doubt about it. But to locate it on those would require a tower probably well in excess of 200 feet tall, because those are not located on a hill as this site is located. And of course, if you have a tower that exceeds 200 feet, you've got to have lights on it. As indicated in the things we've submitted to the Planning Department, this tower will not have any lights on it. It'll have no noise on it. It will emit no noise, no emissions whatsoever that would be harmful to anyone. In investigating this matter, I have checked with every conceivable source around the lake, people concerning the Corps of Engineer, the Paintown people, the DNR law enforcement people, the DNR administration, and the State Parks Department. Those people have provided letters which I have submitted, and none of them have made any objections to this. Indeed, some of them have indicated that they say, all of them state that they don't need to use the tower right now, but they might want to somewhere down the road. This also has included a letter from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. All of these indicate that they have no objections. I think perhaps the greatest good that a tower at this site would bring to the community would be from a public safety point of view. It's a little bit ironic that the Planning Department pointed out their concern about safety of people on the road there. But I think the real safety here is that this tower, and only this tower, will permit everyone on that lake, everyone in Paintown, and then the surrounding area to use a cell phone and count on it working right. There is no question but that there are accidents every year on the lake, many serious accidents. There's accidents in Paintown. It obviously would be a very good idea from a public safety point of view to be able to have cell phone access to for emergency help. I am aware of the fact that I think this board has granted only one setback, I think, from the 200 feet requirement, and I think that was on North 37. It was not granted as far back as this is requested, and I forget the footage, but it was granted. This board has also granted requests for setbacks for towers for sides or rears, and those have been granted in the past for as much as we are requesting here. I assume you're going to hear from all these fine people here tonight, and that's good. I think you should hear from them. But I also believe that if this variance is granted, there will be a 199-foot tower there, counting the antenna or the lightning rod. But I don't believe that it will cause those problems indicated in the report. And I don't know what Mary's position is now, or the planning department, since we submitted those additional documents to address those concerns, because we were only able to obtain those yesterday and today and present them today. In closing my presentation, I would like to make sure that all documents that we have submitted to the planning department be made a part of the record. I assume that will be done. Is that correct, Mary?
Yes, everything that you submitted is part of the official file.
Okay. And that being said, I would be happy to try to answer any questions you have. If the questions are beyond my expertise, then I would have some of these representatives come up and answer them.
I have a question. Isn't there another tower south of Smithville, off of Fairfax, close to Fairfax Marine?
There is one at Smithville on Fairfax Road, but that is
And
the...
south of there, right across, not right across, but very close to Smithville, and Fairfax Marine.
I don't believe so. I think there's one at Smithville on Fairfax.
Yeah, I believe there is one in that location, in that area, but it is, for the purposes of the Wireless Communication Facilities Chapter, for the co-location review, is that what you're thinking of? They only have to review sites within a mile. The two closest sites, existing sites to this petition site, are both about 3 miles away, north and south on 446. I believe that site is even further than 3 miles away. If you like, we have the map in the office. I can go check for you. Okay.
Yes.
Let me go check.
We have submitted a propagation map to the planning department, and I have another one here, and it shows that the closest ones is one about 3.5 miles north on 446 toward town, and one about a mile from the lake on Fairfax Road. The only reason the tower is needed on this site or very close to this site is so that the communications can be passed from this tower onto the other towers, the one on Fairfax Road and the one back towards town. I would point out to you that there is a tower about 220 feet tall located on the state grounds there by Paintown, which has been there for a number of years. That tower would be fine for my clients to locate on as a co-user or any other company, but unfortunately the state does not permit that, and I have obtained from the state a letter stating that. We made the request of them, but they do not permit it. Now, the irony of that is that under the Federal Communications Act of Telecommunications Act of 1996, the federal government states that federal grounds can be used and will be used for these sites, and they are placed all over on federal property. And they also encourage the states to do the same thing. And I don't know about other states, but Indiana has never done that. So that is not an option. Along 446, between 446 and Highway 46, East 3rd Street, there are 5 towers at this time, counting the one by the state. Those towers are on, and one, the radio tower, out by East 3rd Street. The Telecommunications Act also specifies that obviously communities have the absolute right to regulate these towers. We acknowledge that, and we obviously agree with that policy. But they prohibit communities from prohibiting these towers. Now, we would gladly locate this tower anywhere along that corridor where it is needed. We don't care where, as long as we would as long as we could get permission to do so. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that. If anybody knows of any location that they will permit us to do it, we'd be happy to switch to that location. This is a business site. It's already business. And for all these reasons I've stated, seems to be the logical place for it. Any other questions?
I don't think so, Mr. Jones. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the petition other than you tonight, unless we need?
Not unless you have questions.
Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, obviously there's people here to speak against the petition, and we'll try to do this in a systematic order of whoever's ready to speak, and try to be as brief as you can. I will ask you to come to the podium, give us your name and address, and then you will have to be sworn in prior to your testimony. So if you would, whoever wants to be first, why, please step to the podium.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
It's up to your discretion, but the rules of procedure for conduct of hearing for a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting can limit each remonstrator to speak for a limit of 5 minutes.
Yes.
It's up to your discretion
Yes.
if you want to invoke that or not.
We prefer that, and that's what I'd read in the first one here, try to hold it to a limit of 5 minutes,
Okay.
and we can go from there. If you are an attorney and I'm not aware of that fact, please tell me so, and then you won't have to be sworn in. So.
Good evening, Mr. Dillon. My name's Tom Densford. I'm a partner with the Bloomington law firm of Taylor, Bauer, and Densford. I represent property owners that are adjacent to this proposed site. A good many of them are filling this room as we speak. The basic objection that the surrounding property owners have to this project is that it meets none of the requirements for the wireless communication facilities ordinance. There are a number of permitted uses that are identified. This proposal falls into none of those. It is not a co-location of a current site. It is not an improvement or an addition to an existing structure. It doesn't replace an existing structure, and it's not located on a wireless communications facility overlay district. There is, as I understand it, a request to rezone this particular parcel for a WCF district. That has not been presented to this commission as of yet. I believe it's scheduled later in this month. For whatever reason, scheduling-wise, it appears to me that we have the cart before the horse in terms of requesting an exception to a zoning designation that hasn't been granted yet. This is a grandfathered business use based upon the uses of this land prior to the enactment of the ordinance. It's not a heavy business use, at least in this particular site. And until it is approved as an overlay district, it seems a bit premature to be requesting for an exception to the requirements of that district. The other possibility is that this proposal is exempt from the ordinance. If it were used for police, fire, ambulance, emergency use, or for private use like satellite dishes, it falls within none of those requirements. As close as it comes is the possibility of a conditional use, an exception from the design standards, or variance from the design standards, that require this commission to go further in terms of granting an exception than it has ever historically done. Our research indicates that there was only one other site where a variance or an exception was requested to these setbacks that are contained in the ordinance. That petition was voluntarily withdrawn, and the, as I recall, the petitioner is now co-locating on the Hoosier Energy site. I would point out that that site also was primarily agricultural in nature, not heavily traveled, and certainly not within falling distance of a number of residential sites. If you look to the staff report that has been submitted, there is discussion of particularly sensitive properties. Those particularly sensitive properties are the residential areas owned by these people who will speak in a moment. There are Forest Park Estates to the west. There is Winfrey Estates, and there's approximately 18 acres of forest reserve property owned by Mr. and Mrs. Scanlon that is used for their residence and has been approved for 3 other residences. Many of these residential areas are within the 200 feet of this proposed tower, and certainly within the aesthetic view site of the tower. There are many other properties that are affected. So in terms of the potential precedential value of this exception, it is the belief of a good number of the homeowners that the commission would be taking a step backwards in terms of the work that was done by the WCF task force and by all the public input. I mean, the 200-foot setback and the 500-foot setback are not arbitrary figures. They were arrived at based upon the purported purposes of this ordinance, which include to conserve the scenic, historic, aesthetic, environmental quality of the county, the tourism industry, to avoid adverse impacts of wireless communications facilities, promote long-range planning, and to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare, and give due regard to the comprehensive plan of Monroe County. There will be people that will speak to the scenic aspect of this corridor along 446. It is a heavily traveled area, particularly in the spring and the summer, also in the fall with boating and various outdoor hiking and other recreational uses. That all commingle at this point with a fairly heavy residential use. The particularly sensitive nature of this area and the surrounding residential areas are directly opposed to this particular site. It is the opinion of various people that there are other potential sites that may or may not have been exhausted. I checked the file as early as earlier today, and there was not any meaningful documentation that I saw that would indicate there are no other prospective sites. I'll be looking forward to reviewing the information that Mr. Jones submitted. The only responses I saw from any state agencies or areas indicated they had no interest of co-locating on this tower, which makes me question whether or not it is necessary. If there are definitive statements in terms of no co-location on state properties or state facilities or other private sites available, then it's the petitioner's burden to demonstrate that, and I encourage the commission to hold them to this burden. In closing, I would ask the commission to review closely the staff report, review closely the purposes and the requirements of the ordinance, and find that this proposal meets none of those requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi.
We're going to have 8 of those, I think.
Time to breathe.
Okay, let's try it again.
Okay. My name is Paula Boner. I live at 7313 Salt Creek Drive in Salt Creek Township. I'd like to...
Ms. Boner, do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Please continue.
I have a petition here signed by roughly 65 residents. All of these residents were probably within about a mile of the proposed site for the tower. I would say conservatively that's about 90% of the residents within a mile of this tower. All the people on this petition are opposed to this tower being here. And in fact, I walked around with this petition a lot. Most of them say cellular coverage down here is just fine. They really don't need it. So I'd like to hand this in.
Okay. How many copies have you got of that? Just the one?
This is the original. We have a copy for ourselves.
Okay, I better give that to Mary there if you would. And
I also have with this a letter from the property owner directly across 446 from the proposed site, and he was not able to come this evening, so he wrote a letter for your consideration.
okay, that's with this.
That is
Okay.
within that. Just a little history that I've been able to dig up about the ordinance on regarding WCF towers. The Monroe County Planning Department started work on an ordinance regulating the placement and operation of WCF towers in about the spring of 1998. They didn't take the job on lightly. The ensuing year saw 2 task forces comprised of members of the Monroe County Planning Commission, local residents and property owners, industry representatives, the Monroe County Communications Committee, and the Monroe County Zoning Ordinance Committee. These task forces met weekly and sometimes twice weekly in an effort to educate themselves about WCF, the technologies they use, and the physical requirements of implementing these technologies. They studied ordinances from around the country in an effort to see what was working elsewhere. Several Plan Commission meetings were held throughout the year, and there was a great deal of public interest and input both at these meetings and in newspaper articles and letters to the editor in the local papers. In the spring of 1999, the moratorium on the construction of new communications towers was lifted, and the new ordinance was put in place. It had been a true example of government process working the way it should. Now, less than 2 years later, the Monroe County Plan Commission is being petitioned for a variance to this ordinance. Actually, several substantial variances. The petitioner has asked that we accept a 35-foot front yard setback rather than the ordinance's requirement of 200 feet from State Road 446, and at a site that is at the entrance to several destinations of tourists coming to Monroe County seeking a relaxed and natural setting: the Paintown State Recreation Area, the Hoosier National Forest, and Lake Monroe. They also ask that the residents near this site be made to accept a variance that allows a rear yard setback less than half that the ordinance requires. We, the citizens of Monroe County, the people who live in the neighborhoods directly adjacent to this proposed tower, believe that this petition does not merit such a drastic deviation from the ordinance. We believe the petitioner has not adequately demonstrated and documented an inability to co-locate on other nearby towers and on other structures such as water towers in this area. We believe the petitioner has not fully demonstrated a need for this proposed tower, and we believe that the petitioner has not chosen a site suitable for such a tower. Therefore, we ask that the Board of Zoning Appeals, that the Plan Commission uphold the ordinance as written and deny this petition for variance. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
I'm Dave Richardson. I also live at 7313 East Salt Creek Drive.
You penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Please continue.
I'd like to address how the placement of the cell tower would not be compatible with Monroe County's stated principle of conserving the scenic, historic, and aesthetic and environmental qualities of Lake Monroe. I think it was clearly stated in the staff report that the placement of the cell tower at the proposed site would adversely impact the aesthetics of the surrounding area and the environment. Lake Monroe is the most visited lake in the state, as I'm sure you're well aware of. There are more than 1 million people who visit the area to enjoy the lake, the natural environment around it. Many people, thousands of people every year come to the state recreational area at Paintown to enjoy boating and hiking, and et cetera. And I won't repeat that again because that has already been stated. Mr. Jones, I think, did not address the adverse effects on the scenic and aesthetic environment. I think he didn't. I think he skipped over that. He said that the hill on the site was totally unusable for anything. I'm wondering if he didn't look at the trees behind the hill. You were speaking about green space earlier in the Menard issue, and I guess we're here to say that we already have green space in certain areas of the county, and it's our responsibility to preserve them. People come to the state recreational area to enjoy the natural environment. It's pretty much seen as a gateway from the north, from Indianapolis and the surrounding area to Lake Monroe, to launch your boats, to enjoy the area. And I think Mr. Jones stated that as you would be driving down the highway, you would see the cell tower there. So I think that is in direct violation of the regulations concerning aesthetics. I think that's a big concern, and without wasting a lot of your time, I think that is one of the most important issues. That these variances are going counter to the county's stated position on preserving the natural environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Sally Havens. I live at 7074 Salt Creek Drive.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your last name.
Havens.
Havens? Okay, Ms. Havens. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief? Please continue.
I wanted to make a couple of comments about the personal observations of the residents in the need for a cellular tower in that area. We had precious little time, but we did go door to door. And as you'll see, the vast majority of people feel they don't need a cellular tower. And the reason we feel we don't need it is because our cell phones work out there. We drive 446, we live in the area, we use the lake, and with the exception of some very isolated coves or pockets, we don't have a problem. And so on your main thoroughfares, on your main roads, and in your homes, our cell phones work. We were also reassured to see a letter from Major Skinner of DNR Law Enforcement. He wrote they have a comparable tower and have no need for a new tower. Now, if you look closely at that letter, or if you don't have it, he said our primary concern would be how that new site would impact our law enforcement efforts in the area, and our radio communications in particular, and that was of concern to us. So I just wanted to reiterate that the majority of people in the area on the lake say we don't need this. It's a vast reservoir. It covers many, many miles. Why don't they put the tower where there's a need? Many of us bought homes in that area because of the restrictions of the zoning ordinance, and our neighborhood does not want or need a cellular tower. The site is inappropriate. We live in an exquisitely beautiful peninsula. He said we're a mile from the lake, but on two sides we're a half mile from the lake. This is a peninsula, and it's in the Area 2 of the Lake Monroe watershed, where the wild eagles soar over our homes, where the sandhill cranes and other birds migrate. And please don't let it be despoiled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Scanlon, S-C-A-N-L-A-N. I live at 4885 South State Road 446.
Okay, Mr. Scanlon, do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
Please continue.
Thank you. This cellular tower is not suitable because it does not comply with the setback guidelines of the Monroe County zoning ordinance, as you've heard. Our home is located due east of the proposed site. Our property is only 240 feet from the proposed 199-foot tower, less than half of the 500-foot required in zoning ordinance. While I'm not a surveyor, after reviewing a land survey prepared by Archer and Associates of our property, we believe our house alone would be less than 700 feet from the tower. Monroe County Plan Commission has developed an ordinance to protect its citizens' public safety, health, and general welfare. Given the restriction of the ordinance, we encourage the board to follow the recommendations of Mary Ogle and to reject this application for variance. The applicant is not asking for a mere 10 to 25 feet variance. They're asking for more than half of the required rear setback. In addition, on the front setback, they're asking for only 18% of what is required by the ordinance. Our 18 acres were purchased with the possibility of dividing our property into 2 additional parcels when our daughters, who we have, are grown. They could then build houses on these parcels. The proximity of one of these parcels to the proposed tower would definitely terminate this dream, and you could put a house along this slope, like our house is built along a very steep slope. One final comment is Mr. R.D. Jones proposed or stated that the tower was around 200 feet from the road. We have a letter from Mr. Jones to the Board of Zoning Appeals which states the monopole would be approximately 55 to 60 feet from the edge of the road. I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Kate Scanlon. I also live at 4885 South State Road 446.
Okay, Ms. Scanlon, do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Please continue.
Safety is a major concern of ours. Although proponents may say that this tower is designed to collapse upon itself, we agree with the findings of the Commission, who've determined that additional setback distances may be needed to protect the residential properties from components scattered by a storm. This ordinance provides our margin of safety. The wind velocities are much greater on the ridges than they are in the adjacent valleys. The proposed tower is on the highest point along the ridge behind our house. This is a safety issue for our family as well as our home. The tower would be highly vulnerable to thunderstorm activity. Setback requirements do provide this margin of safety. In addition, the falling debris could also damage the existing boat storage business on the property as well as the neighboring businesses. I know that they say that it would collapse upon itself, but I didn't hear them say that it had collapsed upon itself before, that they have built these towers and one of them did collapse and it fall directly on itself. I didn't hear that in testimony. The 35-foot setback from the right-of-way of the State Road 446 should be a concern to everyone who drives on this road. This is a major north-south thoroughfare in Monroe County, and everyone here who has driven that road would agree that it's a winding section of road and it's often covered in fog. Should the 199-foot tower collapse or any debris from it fall on the roadway, it could not only block 446, but it could cause a fatal accident. Yet another safety issue, the power lines that are located between the proposed site and the road. You see, we believe that in addition to protecting the citizens, these ordinances were to protect the county from civil lawsuits in the event of an accident as well. We also believe that the ordinance was designed to conserve the scenic investment our county has in the tourism business associated with Lake Monroe. We've heard about this before. We attract people from the community. We attract people from out of counties. I see license plates from out of state who are staying at Paintown. We have hunters, fishermen. It's well known for the beauty in the spring and the fall. We were attracted to Monroe County because of these ordinances designed to protect our safety and well-being. Now, I know that the people who researched and developed these standards would have strong feelings about companies from outside our area coming in and asking that we vary or compromise those very standards designed to protect us. We urge you to uphold the Monroe County zoning ordinance and the findings and recommendations of Planner Mary Ogle. We respectfully request that you deny this application for variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak against the petition? And bear in mind, please feel free to speak, but if it's repetitive, try to eliminate that. If you would, ma'am, please.
My name is Sharon Sklar, and I live at 7216 East Salt Creek.
Okay.
Excuse me, East Salt Creek Drive.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Please continue.
Basically, I'm just summarizing what everyone else in our group has brought to your attention. In closing, we would like to remind the board and the commissioners that we expect and hope that those who have been voted into community offices will uphold their responsibilities to their fellow citizens of Monroe County, the place we call home. Your stated purpose is to conserve the scenic, historic, aesthetic, and environmental quality of Monroe County and the tourism industry based thereon from the adverse impacts of wireless communications facilities development. Our community has presented to you very strong reasons why we should not have the WCF installed on this location, and these reasons in themselves should be valid enough for disallowance of this particular site. Though we know that health issues are not acceptable to the board as reasons not to install the tower in this location, we do want it on record that we are very concerned about long-term negative influences from electromagnetic fields that will be emitted from the tower. We can't possibly know yet what the effects will be on the human physiology, wildlife, and plant life of this delicate and precious area. We all share the wonder and beauty that the watershed provides us each day, the primary reason why most of us have chosen to live in this area. And just because we don't have data, that doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to the potential adverse influences that could destroy the balance of nature. With this in mind, we ask the board and the commissioners to deny the variance and proposed rezoning of the property owned by 1001 Properties at 8995 State Road 446. And I would like you to realize that we do have a strong representation here this evening, and I'd like everyone who lives in our community to please rise and show where they stand, and that's against this proposed site. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Frank Velasco, and we live at 7025 Salt Creek Drive.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Please continue.
Contrary to Mr. Jones, we do live on one of those ravines, and we have no problem with our house. Secondly, the lake is used by the military for a lot of their aircraft maneuvers, and a lot of the planes that have flown well below the 199-foot level. And if they were to ever hit the tower in it wouldn't worry about the tower collapsing. You'd have to worry also where the plane was going. And it'd be in the direction of our house, which is in that corridor. And then finally, third, I took my cell phone and we drove every corner of that lake. And I was able to use that phone without any problem at all. I had one spot where I couldn't reach the internet, but then you have to have a really strong signal to get on the internet. But other than that, there's been no problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name's Carrie Mealy, and I live at 7074 Salt Creek Drive.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I do.
Please continue.
I was looking at the geography of the area, and I would really appreciate it if you could look at these maps as I talk. Would that be possible?
No, not really, because you need to be at the podium. I don't know how you...
Well, I can be at the podium, but can I have you...
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to... I thought you were wanting to speak here. We can share.
That's fine, we can share.
We can share, ma'am.
I'm speaking on behalf of creatures who have no voice, and that's the eagles. If you look, on the map where it says Monroe Lake Project, you'll see the road to Paintown. Do you all see that? They proposed to put this tower just right below that road, just south. And if you notice, that's on a peninsula, and that's on the narrowest part of that peninsula. If you look to the north, there's a part of the lake where some of the eagles nest. And in addition, there are other eagles around that aren't nesting. But I talked to Rex Waters at Paintown, and he's an eagle expert over there. And he told me that the eagles fly all around Lake Monroe. And I said, well, if they were up in the air and wanted to feed down below, wouldn't they fly right over this section? And he said, yeah, that's probably true. And I said, as a matter of fact, I've seen eagles flying right over our road when I walk my dogs. He also told me that he has seen dead eagles around every other type of tower. The one exception is this monopole, and that is scientifically unknown because it's a fairly new construction. But you have to keep in mind this is a very foggy area. It won't have lights on it. It seems to me it's extremely likely that at some point an eagle might hit that tower, or migrating birds heading north might hit that tower. And we get sandhill cranes over our area too. As we get, we're on the major flyway, we get all the migrating birds. Let me just check whether I said everything I want to say. I guess the question is whether our eagles should be guinea pigs to scientific uncertainty. It's true that these won't have guy wires. It's true they appear to be a safer design. But it's also true that they're very likely to hit it. A plane is able to hit it. You know, for many reasons, this is just not an appropriate site. And I think if you look at the geography, you can see that it isn't. This site is less than a half mile in two directions to the lake. It's less than a mile if you head down the road to the lake. But it's right in the way, as far as I can tell, for the eagles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I do.
Please continue.
I oppose the tower for a number of reasons. I wanted to also speak because unfortunately I'm part of the 10% that didn't get to sign the petition. I missed the opportunity, and I apologize to my fellow residents. I also oppose it because it's a clear violation of zoning regulations that are meant to protect our property. I find it offensive that someone put a pole up at 199 feet as a private pilot to violate or to go around laws that are designed to protect us poor people that sometimes get too low. The microwave dangers are inherent in these things. And also, something you haven't considered is living out there and seeing some of our fellow Hoosiers come back after a Sunday on the lake. They need all their faculties holding onto their steering wheels. They drive that curvy road, and God forbid they could use their cell phones while they're driving. And unfortunately, and in parts of it, the cell service is pretty sporadic, and it's probably a positive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else to speak against the petition? Okay, if not, Mr. Jones, I think you have some rebuttal time, and possibly, I think there was one gentleman that had a question about the distance between the road and the tower, if you can.
First, regarding that, it is true in my petition I stated that it was 45 feet from the road. That was an estimate by me based upon the drawings that I had seen. I had not at that time had an opportunity to visit the site. I have visited the site twice, and it clearly is 90 to 100 feet from the edge of the road where the tower would be. And that is marked there so that people can see precisely where the center of the tower would be. Okay. First, I believe our petition does clearly indicate we're seeking a rezone to the extent necessary for this facility. Second, this board has granted setback variances for towers. There is no doubt about that, and Mary can verify that. Regarding houses in that area, there is not a house within 500 feet of the property line. It would be very difficult for most of the property around there to build a house that close to the line. It was stated by one of the remonstrators that we've made no attempts to co-locate. Please be advised that this company does not own a tower in Monroe County. This company is currently co-located on all of these towers out there. The Fairfax Tower and the tower owned by Pinnacle, which is about 3.2 miles back towards Bloomington from this site. If we could co-locate in this corridor, we would be happy to do so. Co-locating costs money, but it is cheap compared to spending $250,000 to build this tower, to put this tower up. That brings me to the point made by one person that this tower is not needed. I believe Mary Ogle can tell you that she personally tested her cell phone and it did not work from that location. There may be times when cell phones do work on an especially clear day or perhaps in a specific location they are. But as you can see from the propagation map that we gave you, this has to be a tower in this corridor, very close to where this site is, in order to connect with the tower on Fairfax Road, which this board also approved and is within 1 mile of the lake. I apologize for not addressing the scenic question, which Mary brought out in her comments. There are already 5 towers on 446 or near 446, and you can see them all from 446. 3 of those towers are well in excess of 200 feet, including the state's, and they have to have lights, flashing lights, etc., on those towers. All of those towers can be seen from going both ways on 446. I would be the first person to admit that looking at one of these towers is not the most scenic thing in the world. I admit that. But if we denied towers based on that, we wouldn't have any towers in this country. Certainly not near any road where you could see them. Well, that's where the towers have to be. It doesn't do any good to place a tower 5 miles out in the woods because it serves no purpose. You have to put them along the roads. That's why you see these requests along 37, along 46, along this road, Fairfax Road, and so on. That's where people tend to use their cell phones. I want to correct one gentleman who stated that I stated that this tower would be 200 feet from the road, I believe. I have never stated that, or from the right-of-way either. What I stated was that it would be 90 to 100 feet from the edge of the road, and that is fact. Regarding a comment about lightning storms, this tower will have an 8-foot lightning rod on the top of it, which will effectively prevent any damage caused by lightning. Regarding RF emissions, I will simply comment that I have an expert here on RF emissions who can answer any questions, but suffice it to say that that is not a consideration for this board under federal law. We have complied with the Federal Communications Commission, Telecommunications Commission, and they have certified that we are permitted to put this tower up at this location, and it is not an RF emissions problem. Concerning eagles, I know of no empirical study anywhere that says that these towers, that birds run into these towers and kill themselves. I, too, talked to Rex Waters at the Point Administrative Office. I sat there for approximately an hour and talked to Mr. Waters. He never came up with a single reason, a single drawback to having this tower there. I specifically asked him, whether they had any experience with eagles or other birds running into the other tower, and he said none to his knowledge. Where he comes up with, I've seen dead eagles all around towers, if that's what he said, I am totally aghast at that. Lastly, I want to iterate to these fine people here. I wish we didn't have to put a tower out there. I wish we didn't have to put a tower anywhere. But we can't, and I wish we didn't have to put a tower 199 feet tall. But you have to, or the cell phones will not work. There is no other place in that area that we can co-locate. We've asked the state, they have a permissible tower there, but they will not let us or anybody use it. So this is a situation where, to satisfy the requirements that are specifically authorized and addressed in the Telecommunications Act of 1996, we need this tower in this corridor. We don't care whether it's on this site or if it's back up the road 200 yards. That doesn't matter to us. If these fine people would point out a location that in this corridor that we could use, we will gladly use it. We are prepared to attempt to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from Mr. Jones from the board or staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I would just like to reiterate and testify that what Mr. Jones said is true. I did take the...
Sorry.
I just have one more minute.
Yes. Yes, keep it brief, please.
Okay. On the back of my cell phone, I have a booster that gives you this antenna extends like a